are you?
Good. I'm so pleased to be able to come again 2 days in a
Yes,
row.
I know.
I'm
Thank
looking
you.
forward to it.
And then I turn it up. Good morning. We are going to go ahead and get started. My name is Paulette Dilworth, and I am co-chair along with Alan Bolton of the Provost Search Committee. And I'd like to welcome you this morning. It's great to see all of you here. We have our third candidate, Pam Benoit. But before I introduce Dr. Benoit, what I'd like to do is remind everyone that the survey assessment of the candidate will be available on the website. So please remember to go out and give us some feedback. And also, Alicia Jones is here with the microphone. After Pam's presentation, we will open up for questions and answers. So hope you have lots of questions. So Dr. Benoit is the senior administrator with more than 20 years of experience in administration academics. Innovative, strategic, and a committed leader with experience in advocacy, board relations, strategic budgeting and planning, diversity and inclusion, globalization, fundraising, economics, development, faculty, student, staff, and alumni relations. Currently, she serves as the executive vice president and provost at Ohio University, and her bio information is also available on the website if you'd like to learn more about her background. But please join me in welcoming Pam. She's going to talk to us for about 30 minutes, and then afterwards we'll open it up for questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So let me say first that I'm very pleased to be here. And as I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about and say about this very important topic about the future of higher education in about 20 to 30 minutes, it reminded me of a list of comprehensive questions that was amusing and over the top in particular disciplines that we used to circulate to reduce the tensions about the actual comprehensive questions that we were giving to our students. For example, in music, the question that we gave was, in half an hour, write a concerto for at least 3 instruments. In medicine, remove your appendix, you'll find a scalpel under your chair. So I'll see what I can say about this very important topic in the time that's been allotted. And what I plan to do today is to talk about some trends that I believe have an impact on higher education, on the future of higher education. There are 3: demographic shifts, new information, economy, and technology, and the third is partnerships. And I want to start with demographic shifts. There are 3 that I want to talk about. The first is diversity and globalization. By 2055, the US will not have a single racial or ethnic majority. Diversity, in fact, will be the new majority. We're increasingly impacted by immigration and by globalization. Alabama projects a future that is more diverse by 2025, and UAB has 30% of its enrollments that are racial and ethnic and diversity, and international students are 3.6% of its enrollments. UAB obviously is consistently ranked among the most diverse institutions in the country. Diversity, of course, includes a wide variety of different kinds of diversity: race, age, color, disability, faith, religion, ancestry, national origin, citizenship, sex, sexual orientation, social class, economic class, ethnicity, gender identity, gender expression, and other kinds of identities as well. It's diversity writ large. So as higher education looks to the future, and UAB in particular, we need to be considering how we ensure that we have the student services to support a diverse student population, how the curriculum and how medical education is responsive to the needs of a diverse student population, how we continue to increase the diversity of our faculty and our staff, how we recruit, retain, and support a diverse student population, faculty, and staff. How we ensure that our students thrive in diverse environments, both while they're in college and beyond. And consistent with the values of UAB, how we inspire equity and inclusive excellence throughout Alabama, the nation, and also the world. The second demographic shift I want to talk about has to do with women. And I'll confess that I talk about this because I happen to be one. Women's role in the labor force and leadership positions has grown dramatically since the 1960s. But a quarter of women in college today, about 4.8 million students, are raising dependent children, and more than half of them are single parents. But only 33% of those with children will actually complete their college degrees within 6 years. 61% of UAB students now are female. 40% of the full-time faculty are women, and there are many outstanding administrators and staff that are female at UAB. And I look and I see that there are programs like the Women Student Leaders and the Alabama Network for Women Leaders at UAB. So there are a number of programs that are already working on these issues. But they're for the future, and especially given the large classes of women at UAB and the increasing leadership of women at UAB, it is possible to build a nationally recognized niche on women and leadership, built on a strong foundation, including the extraordinary work of the Commission on the Status of Women by considering leadership opportunities and experiences for students, women in STEM fields, creating mentoring opportunities, badging opportunities, rethinking policies toward an eye for flexibility for working parents, finding more leadership opportunities for women and administrators like HERS, the HERS conference, to continue to ensure that women's contributions will be recognized as valuable and respected by UAB in a way that empowers success and embraces achievement. The third one I want to look at is socioeconomic shifts. The middle class is shrinking. The number of US adults living in middle-class households fell to 50% in 2015 after being the majority for 4 decades. And you're probably not surprised to hear that the gap between the middle and the upper class is widening. Combine this with another interesting finding. 15% of parents now say that they believe that their children should pay every cent of college on their own. And 32% say that children should pay for most of the expenses of college. This obviously puts pressure on college affordability. Americans now owe $1.4 trillion in student loan debt, spread out about over 44 million borrowers. The average student loan debt for UAB students is $27,000. And at the same time, state support is declining for higher education. Per student funding for public colleges and universities in Alabama is 36% lower than in 2008. So there continues to be pressure on all sides on college affordability. If the middle class is shrinking, how do we rethink financial aid to be responsive to increasing need, not just from lower socioeconomic groups who also have need, but also from the middle class? Higher education is linked to social mobility. How can we contribute meaningfully to the conversation and implications of the redistribution of wealth? How does UAB become a national leader in the conversation on rethinking the business model for higher education that makes college affordable while still maintaining academic quality? And you can think about the numerous conversations that are out there about this very issue. Conversations about free college, tuition guarantees, 3-year degree plans, efficiencies, income share agreements, financial literacy programs. All of those are the current swirl of conversations. What other kinds of conversations need to take place in order to really begin to address this issue? The second main trend I want to talk about is what I call the new information economy and technology. And we're going to start with the new information economy. When I talk about this, I'm talking about the economy in which knowledge is the raw material and the source of value. And when we look at the new information economy, there are a number of indicators about whether or not an economy is moving in this direction. Given the time limits, I'm only going to talk about two. The first one has to do with venture capital investments. And Alabama is ranked as a state 35th out of the 50 states in venture capital investments. There's an interesting map about where venture capital investments are occurring across the country. And there are a couple of things that you see in this map. One is, and the circles are by the amount of investment. So the first thing that you begin to see is that the bigger circles are on the coast, both the East Coast and the West Coast. And then you start to look at, is there any venture capital investment in Alabama? And let me see if I can find you. You're right there. That's the one dot in Alabama for venture capital investments. And it's right here, right in Birmingham. And that's an indication of whether or not the new information economy is thriving or not in this state. And the only place where it has any uptake is in Birmingham. And the amount of uptake compared to the rest of the country is small in comparison to what it could be. So venture capital investment needs to grow in order to be moving into the information economy. It's clearly on the rise, but it needs to be larger. The second piece, get my right device. The second piece of the information economy is an index that's called the New Economy Index. And it ranks Alabama 47th in the country out of 50 states. And it has a number of indicators. It includes knowledge jobs, innovation capacity, globalization factors, economic dynamism, and the digital economy. And Alabama, as I said, ranks low on that particular factor. How UAB fits into that future is that the information economy ecosystem needs to be developed, and UAB can help move Alabama, not just Birmingham, but the entire state, more into that information economy by what it does. By workforce, the number of degrees it produces. You just graduated, I think it was 4,500 students. The aligning the university strategy with its partners through the Blueprint Birmingham and Accelerate Alabama, and by building and expanding the ecosystem that helps to develop more of the information economy, by fostering more of an entrepreneurial environment like the Innovation Lab, the Innovation Depot, maker spaces, all of that builds the kind of thing that makes that dot get larger. The second part of this is technology. I put this little cartoon up, let you read it for a minute, to illustrate how pervasive technology has become. It is a part of our lives. I want you to think for a minute how many devices you own. Smart devices, watches, iPads, desktops, laptops. How many devices do you own? Game consoles. Curtis, what was the device that you just bought your wife that you can cook with?
I still don't know the name of it. It links to my iPad, though.
Yes, those kind of devices. How many devices do you own? Have you counted them up in your head? At least five. Anybody above 5? I will tell you, I own 8. 8 devices. The average number of devices that a student owns, according to a recent survey, you want to take a guess? 6. The average number of devices that students own and are bringing to campus is 6 devices. Technology is all around us. It is influencing our lives. It is both disruptive, it contributes to the way in which we are doing our work. It contributes to the way students want to learn, how they want to conduct university business. It is also a tremendous innovator of the way we are doing things. And I want to talk a little bit about the impact of technology, particularly on universities. So let's talk about it on teaching first. You think about the impact of technology on teaching. And think about augmented and immersive reality. We think about online and hybrid programs. We think about flipped classrooms. I want to give you one example. One of the things that we're working on at Ohio University right now is that we have a grid lab that works on augmented and immersive reality. And they are working right now on recreating an emergency room in all of its craziness so that students, before they go out and do their rotations, have that experience. And I am told that it is very realistic, very stressful, and really does an excellent job of creating that reality for medical students. That is a teaching tool that has been tremendous for those students. There are all kinds of ways that we are using technology to think about teaching in new ways. And you, I'm sure, have lots of those examples as well about how you're using technology to influence the way you're teaching now in your classes. That is changing the way we are teaching. It also changes the way we do research. Professor Schweibel here in the psychology department has this incredibly interesting study I was reading about where he's working on virtual reality technologies to evaluate children's safe street crossing skills that was funded by NIH. So he's using a really interesting technology to do his work. And there are many other examples that I could mention. So I'm sorry if I haven't mentioned you, but there are lots of other examples too. This is just one that I happened to come across. Patient care is being influenced by technology. New wearables that can be used to monitor patients is another way technology is influencing patient care. And then the last one that I want to mention very briefly, and this again comes from my own background, is what's the impact on interpersonal communication? So there are a number of studies now that have come out that have suggested that because of our almost addiction to our mobile devices, we have decided that it is easier sometimes for us to use our devices rather than to have face-to-face conversations. Have you ever noticed that sometimes you'll be in a restaurant and people will be at a table and they will be on their devices rather than talking to each other? One of my best examples of this is a couple that I know pretty well who are having some difficulties, and he decided to divorce her over a text and told her over the text because it was easier to do that rather than having a face-to-face conversation with her. So one of our challenges, I think, is to make sure that we have allowed individuals to be both productive in face-to-face conversations as well as to be competent in using their technologies as well. So there are implications for interpersonal relationships in relationship to technology too. So consistent with the UAB strategy, the strategic plan that prepares students and the community for the challenges of the new world economy and also allows us to enhance and to understand technology, we need to be thinking about how do we prepare for the future, both in terms of the new economy and also in terms of technological advances that are coming our way. The third trend has to do with partnerships. And partnerships allow us to do more than we can obviously do alone. And there are three kinds of partnerships that I think are particularly important. The first are interdisciplinary partnerships. And already with your interdisciplinary centers, you've acknowledged how important those are. So there are research centers that we can do, but I also think there are many opportunities in terms of interdisciplinary curriculum. And as I look at the new programs that you're beginning to develop, you also know that that's particularly important. In the future, there are likely to be a greater number of interdisciplinary majors, and there are also likely to be a broader number of inter-university collaborations for interdisciplinary majors across multiple institutions as students reach out and try to do new kinds of majors that allow them to express their interests across a whole variety of different kinds of fields. A lot more interdisciplinarity in a lot of different kinds of ways. A second kind of partnership is a community partnership. One of the things that I've learned in discussing with different groups while I've been here is that there's a very strong relationship between the university and Birmingham, the city of Birmingham. And in fact, somebody said to me that UAB is sometimes fondly talked about as the university that ate Birmingham. But there's a strong connection. I know that you've been recognized by the 2015 Carnegie Community Engagement Classification. universities have worked very closely with their communities in order to develop strong community relationships and partnerships. These have included initiatives like affordable housing initiatives, urban community research centers like the UAB Center for the Study of Community Health, the Center for Educational Accountability, mixed-use development, business incubators, local purchasing and hiring, K-12 partnerships, arts collaboratives, and more. And even though there have been a number of initiatives already, there's an immense amount of opportunity for additional community partnerships that have not been explored here between the university and the city of Birmingham. So I'd be really interested in looking at what else is possible to do additional community kinds of partnerships. And the third kind of partnership are industry partnerships, especially as there's more and more tension on funding, and particularly federal funding. We need to look for other kinds of sources of funding, and industry partnerships are a good place to look for that kind of funding, both for research funding and also for opportunities for our students. I saw that Dean Alexander has a new relationship with Alltech, where co-ops and internships for students are being explored, where there's philanthropic support for the School of Engineering with students. There are also opportunities for that kind of funding for other schools and colleges as well. So exploring that kind of funding, the new Office for Industry Engagement is another opportunity to expand those kind of relationships as well. Not just for research, but also for opportunities for students, opportunities for expanding those relationships, opportunities for expanding philanthropic kinds of opportunities as well. So all kinds of relationships, all kinds of partnerships. The university can't be siloed. The university has to have partnerships in order to expand its opportunities, its opportunity set. The last thing I want to talk about is UAB's core strengths. And these, initially when I put this presentation together, I had lots of information about these core strengths, and then I said, I don't really need to do that. You know these better than I do. And so what I did is to try to identify what I think are the most important core strengths of this institution. And here are the ones that I put down on my list: that you have top-tier programs, that you have distinguished faculty with awards and incredible research, that you've got internationally renowned research that people are talking about, that you have a spirit of innovation and entrepreneurship, that you have outstanding students. I was just talking to the group that has new Fulbright Awards. You have community engagement that is tremendous, and that you have diversity and inclusion as one of your key values. Those are core strengths that make this institution who you are. But why is that important for the future? It's important for the future because UAB fits into the future by leveraging these core strengths, by moving aggressively to accomplish the strategic plan, by being a national leader on these key future trends that I've just identified, trends like innovation, trends like entrepreneurship and college affordability and diversity and globalization, women's leadership, economic development, partnerships, and philanthropy. These kinds of core strengths allow you to move forward on these particular kinds of trends that I've talked about. As I've talked to people, one of the things I keep hearing are a number of words: that this is an institution with energy, excitement, movement, growth, optimism, and opportunity. And I have to say that I'm particularly excited about the potential opportunity to work with you to change the world. Thank you.
Okay, who wants to ask the first question? Not all at once.
Hi, Jim McClintock. Been here for 29 years, and historically our university has started with a medical school and the academic side of campus. I should say both sides are academic, but the university portion of the campus has grown considerably since then, but we've always had a bit of a issue between the two halves of the campus, and we're making progress. What might you bring to the table to unify a campus that has historically consisted of sort of two components, the medical and the university sides?
So I will tell you that I've asked that question a couple times while I've been here, And one of the things that I've heard is something that you just said, which is that things have improved over the last several years. And I think there are a lot of opportunities to provide bridging between the campus. Some of that is done through programs that are shared, and people are working together on those programs, and some of that is done through joint research. So there are lots of ways of thinking about that. Are there possibilities for joint appointments? Are there possibilities for thinking about more interdisciplinary programs that bridge that? So I think looking for many opportunities for bridging so that the campus is seen as all pulling together in one direction.
I'll come over here.
How often do you read the Chronicle?
Every morning.
What's the last thing you read that made you think about changing the way you think about something?
This morning. This morning I read about the article about how there are two institutions that on Title IX are having issues about their policies on Title IX, and it made me think I need to have a conversation with my Title IX coordinator to make sure that we have the right policies in place on those issues. So I read both Inside Higher Ed and Chronicle every single morning. And I'm always open to thinking about how can we do things better.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So what is, you said that for you interdisciplinarity is very important.
It is.
So what is your vision? And I acknowledge that this is a very, very complex question, but what is your vision for the undergraduate curriculum of the 21st century?
That's a huge question.
I know.
So I think there are a couple of principles about the undergraduate curriculum that need to be taken into account. One is that we need an undergraduate curriculum that moves with our students. That students that from 5 years ago, even 2 years ago, are not the same students that we have today. We need to be thinking about what their interests are and what we need to be doing to prepare those students to go out into their futures. So one of the things I often think about is the kinds of careers that we are launching students into are often careers that don't even exist today. And so we need to be thinking about how do we help our students to be flexible? How do we help our students to think about ways to adapt, ways to be critical thinkers, ways to be able to take information and work with information in ways that are flexible and adaptable, and realize that they are not, a lot of them are not going to go into a predefined career the way they used to. So it used to be the case that people would have a single career for their entire lives. Now we know that students will go into multiple different careers during their trajectories, that a lot of times they won't go into a single career. A lot of times their careers change dramatically from the career they started out in. A lot of times students will think that they're going into one career and end up not ending up in that career at all. So we need to give them different kinds of pathways in order to have good opportunities into those careers. We also need to give them good skill sets in order to be able to go into those careers. So the real challenge for undergraduates is, I know there's this real argument right now, is that we are not a training facility as a higher education institution. So you don't want to be thinking of yourself as being a two-year training school. But at the same time, we also need to give them good skills to get them jobs. And so we want to give them a well-rounded education, a good liberal arts education that allows them to have critical thinking skills, that allows them to be good global citizens. But we also want to give them skills that allow them to get them jobs. One of the things I do on a regular basis right now is that I meet with students when they first come in. I do the orientations for students and their families. And the first question that I get from families is, will my son or daughter get a job when they're done? That's what they're concerned about. And they want to know, what's the probability? What are we doing in terms of career placement for those students? How will they get to a job? Because they don't want them coming back to their house after graduation. And that is a very big concern. So part of our undergraduate curriculum, I think, is making sure that we are giving them a quality education, but that we're giving them that has skills that they can produce that will be helpful for the state. So there's a real balancing that we need to be doing for them.
Yesterday, I asked a question when you met with the faculty senators that I'd like to repeat and ask again. I had
I
asked.
remember what I said.
Let's say it's a test to see if it's the same. Talked about the interdisciplinary working together. Well, yesterday I asked what types of projects have you helped spur or have you helped motivate in Ohio or Missouri that perhaps you would like to do again, or ideas that you're bringing with you so that we can establish this interdisciplinary cross-campus type of work.
Thank you. I do remember my answer. So one of the projects that I worked on at Ohio University that I'm really excited about is what we call the innovation strategy. And that strategy was built out of long conversations with the deans initially, and then with the campus to try to figure out how did we incentivize more interdisciplinary work. And we identified four assets, four things that we were working on that we knew faculty were really interested in and where we had a lot of work going on. And our areas were health and wellness, energy and the environment. We have a very strong engineering school that's doing a lot of work in that area, but we also had some other people doing that work too. The digital world, and then the vibrant society. These were all large social issues that we thought we could contribute to. And then we said what we want to do is to encourage more interdisciplinary work there. So we put $4.4 million on the table for RFPs. And people could put in grants. We had both large grants and planning grants, but it had to involve at least 2 colleges, individuals, groups that were working across colleges to get one of those grants. And we're now in our second funding cycle for that. We've already done funding for one cycle. It was 3-year funding for anybody who got one of those grants, of a large grant. And we were able to get a number of those grants out, both planning and large grants. One of my all-time favorites of the first cycle is a grant that was given to a group that included biologists, individuals from the medical school, and individuals from engineering. And this grant is a really interesting project. What it did is they were interested in studying bone fractures. How do we improve our predictive ability to figure out what will cause a bone fracture? And the current mechanism for determining bone fractures is to do x-rays, and that is not very predictive. They can do it, but it doesn't tell you how often the bone will actually fracture. And so the engineers who came onto the project said, what if we used a technique we use in engineering that allows us to figure out whether or not a bridge will collapse? And the technique in engineering is a vibration technique. And let's see if we can adapt that technique to bone fractures. And so they worked on it for a while, and in fact, it is a much better predictive technique also for bone fractures. So now we have venture capitalists, we have a patent, we are moving that project forward, and eventually that device will come to market. That's the kind of thing that was an interdisciplinary project. And there are many others. There's actually one in teaching that encouraged all kinds of teaching innovation as well, that has probably 8 different colleges that are involved in that project. There are all kinds of projects. And I said earlier, the most interesting thing for me is when I go over to the coffee shop and I'm listening in to conversations and I hear faculty who have never worked together before talking about the grant proposals they're going to put in for these grants. Because what we've done is started to create more of a culture of interdisciplinary work across colleges. So that's the kind of thing that we've been doing. And that's the example I remember. Yes. And I love that example. It's really cool. And those people are doing great work.
Take a shortcut here.
Good morning. I see that you have the Vice Provost for Enrollment Management that reports to you. Is that just the recruitment arm? And then what are your thoughts on growing enrollment as well as retention and graduation?
So I'm also responsible for retention and graduation figures. Institutional research also reports to me. The University College that does most of our retention efforts also reports to me. So all of those pieces are part of my portfolio. One of the things that we have done is also make retention and graduation part of the college's responsibility, so they work on it within their colleges, and we also work on it university-wide as well. So all of those pieces are part of my portfolio now. And we have lots of different things that we've done, so we're working on strategies for first-year programming, because you lose a lot of your students between the first and the second year. We've worked on more programming for the murky middle. The murky middle is this new term that's used for students who are not your most at-risk students, but they're students who look like they're going to do fine. They have a grade point average that would allow them to continue, but in fact, there's usually one course, and it may be a very important course for their major that's causing trouble, or it may be a student who is homesick, or maybe a student who is having financial difficulty, and you're going to lose them because of one of those reasons. And you have to have different kind of interventions for those kinds of students. And so we're spending a lot more of our efforts at trying to catch those students before they decide that they're going to leave us. And so now we have nudging software that we use that identifies those students and reaches out to them. And one of the things that we started to find with that is that when students started to get those emails from our professional advisors, it was like, somebody's actually paying attention to me. Somebody cares about me. Somebody really wants to know whether or not I'm going to stay or not. And it's made a huge difference in our ability to retain students. So that's part of my portfolio too. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Following up on the hospital versus university side of
Yes.
UAB's history and current status, I will admit that I have a bias in this area. I've worked for the UAB libraries for 15 years, and I think there are many metrics that would show a continuous growth for the university in, closing this divide. However, library funding has plateaued basically over the last 10 years, so we're one of the most underfunded library systems among Southeast major institutions. How would you, if you were to become the provost at UAB, approach that issue?
So I actually had a little bit of this discussion yesterday. One of the things that I think Ohio has that Alabama does not is Ohio Link. And Ohio Link is a system where all of the public Ohio institutions go together and share resources and share the negotiation for resources. So when you buy something like Elsevier, we all contribute to buying Elsevier and negotiating on Elsevier. And it makes it easier for us to share those resources. And in fact, if we don't own it, we still have access to it and can tap into it and get it delivered to us. And I know there are some obstacles to getting that kind of a network established in Alabama, but I think one of the things that I would want to do is to try to figure out what those are and how do we overcome them so that there can be a consortium. Other states have this too. New York's got it. Ohio has it. Why can't Alabama do something similar so that they can get access to those resources? Well, Ohio, right, but there has to be a way to do that. I mean, we've even done it with fewer resources. Like we have a research portal now that only has 4 universities that are part of the portal to start with, and we managed to get that up and going. So I don't think it's just number. I think there are other things that are preventing that too. One of the things that you will see in my background is that I'm a mediator. I have mediation training. I know a lot about conflict resolution. That comes in really handy when you get into these kind of sticky situations and you want to try to figure out what is the sticking point and how do we get past it. So one of the things I would want to do is, it won't happen overnight, but how do we get past this impasse in order to get what probably all of the institutions need in order to get the resources that we need? So one of the questions I had coming in about the library was whether or not you were an ARL library, and that was the wrong question to ask.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thanks for coming. My name is Pam Murray. I'm in the history department here, and I enjoyed listening to your answer to Lourdes's question about the undergraduate curriculum and your comment about the importance of a liberal arts education.
Yes.
Because I do think that here at UAB, we do have a tendency to be rather vocationally oriented simply because of the clout of the professional schools here on campus. And so I'm speaking from the standpoint of a member of the liberal arts faculty. And a lot of us who are on the sort of the academic side of campus, who represent the humanities and social sciences, tend to feel that our voice doesn't get heard much when it comes to university policies and even curriculum issues of late. And so my question for you is, what for you is the role of the faculty at a higher education institution and at a university like this? Does it strictly involve the curriculum, control over the curriculum, or does the faculty have a voice in broader policies?
So I would say the faculty have a very important role in curriculum to start with, but there are other issues where faculty need to share their input about other issues as well. So it's not confined solely to curriculum issues. I want to go back to the question about liberal arts. So I started out in a college of arts and sciences. That's my background. That's built into my DNA. I have a very strong affinity to liberal arts. I think the thing that we have not done as well as we should is to articulate the value of a liberal arts education, not just inside the academy, but also outside the academy. And I think we can do a better job of that. So I want to be able to do that. I have advocacy as part of my skill set, and I think we need to be able to do that more. But to your other question, I do think that faculty have very important views, and I think they need to be heard. A lot of times there are multiple stakeholders, and all those stakeholder views need to be taken into account before you can make a decision. But I don't think faculty views are limited only to curriculum issues. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Hi. I want to go back to this idea about, I loved your answer about economic participation and how important it is to prepare students for that. One of the other needs and desires that I hear coming from students is they really seem to want to get involved civically. Students want to, be active participants in democracy, but aren't really sure how. I think our Student Affairs Division does a great job of trying to equip them to do this, but I also wanted to hear your thoughts on ways that the curriculum can prepare them for their roles as citizens. And you mentioned inside higher ed, it seems to me as I read the news each day that universities are in a very reactive stance currently to this desire from students to want to be civically involved. How can universities really take the lead here in, educating and empowering students to be really active citizens now and after they graduate?
So I think there are lots of opportunities. There are obviously opportunities in student government. There are opportunities in other organizations. There are so many social issues where students have an ability to have an impact on those social issues. Become involved, be part of the problem solving around those issues. And so I think Student Affairs is a really good opportunity to invite students into the table and to ask them for their opinions about issues and to ask to problem solve around issues. There are a lot of issues, not only for the university, but also for the community, where students also have a voice where they can help to solve those issues. All of the issues around community engagement that the university is involved in, students have a huge opportunity to be involved in that. One of the great examples that I can point to at our university has to do with sustainability. We have an Office of Sustainability, and a huge part of running that office is student engagement. They run those projects. We have enormous, not only is there curriculum around sustainability, but students run those projects on sustainability on the campus. And that's a big issue for the students. And they said, we want, for example, to have more water coolers on campus that will not use more plastic. So here's what we're proposing to do. They brought the project, and the project got implemented. So I think it's just giving them avenues in order to implement those projects.
Okay.
My question is about the relationship of the university and the public.
Yes.
And you touched on increasing faculty and others hold. And therein lies, the problem. So we have faculty and administrators who feel they're underappreciated, both internally and externally. And we have a public that is itself struggling, children struggling, and there's a loss of, an erosion of hope in many ways for those people. So, I'm not sure how we actually got to all of this, but what is the role of the university, particularly in a state like Alabama, where all of the numericals that you projected are largely the result of that lack of trust? So what is the role of the university, and then what is the mechanism to build that trust with the public, both locally, statewide and nationally?
So I think the mechanism is relationships. You build it one person at a time. You build it through establishing what the value is of an education. Even though all of that is occurring, there's still evidence that indicates that individuals still want their children to have a higher education. They still value a higher education, even though they're worried about the cost of it, even though there are a lot of articles that are out there that question the value. If you talk to parents, they still want their children to come. They still want them to come to college. So you work on the advocacy for higher education. You work on talking about what value it provides back to the community. You work on what value it provides back to the state. So one of the things that I've done, and both at Missouri and also at OU, both with legislators and also with the community, is to try to do some translation. Because one of the things that I think we haven't done as well is to talk about what is the impact on the community? What is the impact on the state? So for example, when I was at Missouri, one of the things that we did is we took research, both that faculty did and that graduate students did, and we talked about research that had a direct impact on the state of Missouri and why it was that legislators should care about that research. You've probably seen that research that makes fun, the studies that make fun of the research that we do, that is done at the federal level. And I try to reverse that and say, here's why you should care about this research, and particularly if you think the kind of research that's being done here. Why would you care about that? Why does it matter to you? And that begins to turn the conversation. But a lot of those are one-to-one conversations with individuals. They're the kind of conversations that each of you has with your neighbors. They're the kind of conversations that you have when you are at a school meeting. They're the kind of conversations that when you begin to turn people's hearts and minds about the value of what you're doing. Those are incredibly important, and that's how you begin to build trust back. They're not some grand PR move. That won't do it. They're one-on-one kinds of conversations that you have to have. And it's not just the president and the provost having it, it's all of us having those one-to-one conversations that begin to start to value and begin to build the trust back. Those are really important. Can I elaborate on that for just a minute? Have you ever had the conversation like at your holiday events where you're trying to explain to your parents what you do? I have this difficulty all the time. I tell my mom that I'm a provost. She has no clue, and it's the same kind of thing. How do you help people understand what you do and why it's important? That is our challenge.
Hi, Pam.
Hi.
So you've had at least a day on campus, and you
Yes.
had an earlier, encounter with the search committee. So I'm wondering if you can give us your thoughts about, in your time on campus talking with folks, what is something that you feel like we as an institution are doing really well? And can you give us also your insight about something you would want to see us do better?
So the thing I think you're doing incredibly well is that there's a real focus on interdisciplinary work. But the thing I think that you could do better is to think about more mixed use. And what I'm talking about there is intersections between businesses and the university. And I know there's some of that going on, but when I look at other universities and how they're doing, like I look at North Carolina State, I look at Ohio State, I look at even us, Ohio University, and the kind of collaborations that we have between industry and the university. And I look at Birmingham and what's available in this community. There's so much more potential here that you haven't yet grabbed, that I think there's an enormous amount of possibility, and not just in the professional schools. So that I think has enormous, and actually is really pretty exciting as a future possibility. And I will grow that dot. No problem. I do that all the time.
So this is a kind of coordination of senior management question, which is about as far as possible from what I do. In your current position as an executive vice president, there are a lot of things that at UAB report to separate vice presidents who report to the president. And I'd like to know your thinking on what are going to be the opportunities and advantages for that kind of management structure.
Perfectly fine with me. I don't know if you looked at my Vita, but I have a huge portfolio currently, and it would be nice to have a little more focus. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Oh, there we go.
At Ohio U, my impression is that you presided over a pretty aggressive expansion program to develop additional campuses around the state. And I'm curious how you've made decisions when that was an appropriate thing to do, and do you see that as a sort of integral part of how UAB could increase its impact on Alabama?
So I don't know enough to answer the question for UAB. It was really important for us, but we are in a very different situation than UAB is. So think about our situation. Athens, Ohio is in a rural community. And one of the things that we did when we did our environmental scan was we determined that in time, the number of students coming to a rural community to go to college at a residential college would decline. Now, it hasn't happened quite yet, but we know it will eventually happen. And so our plan was to begin to locate some of our campuses in urban areas where the population centers were. So think about what we did. We located in Dublin, Ohio, in Columbus, in the Columbus MSA. We located in Cleveland, in a large population center, and we have a center in Dayton, all of the large, growing population centers. That was no accident. You're in a large population center, so the strategy for you will probably be quite different.
I'm getting my steps.
You're getting in your steps.
I'm
No
getting my
kidding.
steps in today.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Purdue University just did something that no other institution has done yet.
Yes,
and I emphasize yet, to buy Kaplan University. What do you think about that?
I think they are very much trying to completely increase their online market. The thing I want to see, and I was reading actually this morning about they are giving them a lot of rights that the faculty are quite upset about. So I want to look at the details before I see whether or not I think that was a good move on their part. Clearly, people are trying to get into the online market in a big way. We were having this discussion the other day. If you are not in the online market right now, you will not get in. There are, I think I read, there are 5 who are dominating the market right now. And you have to be involved. And if you don't already have your toe in the market, it is unlikely that you'll get in. And Purdue is trying to make a big play. So in the sense that they're trying to make a big play, it's probably a good move. How much did they give away in order to make that big play is yet to be determined.
So do you anticipate that there might be other universities like UAB or other Ohio University that might also try to get into that market
I don't think we would ever buy a for-profit. We would not go down, because I don't want to give up some things that I think you would probably have to do in order to do that. But we are definitely trying to increase our presence there.
I think we have time for one more question, if there is one. Okay, I'll get a few more steps and go back to the top.
Just on that note about how you don't want to go down the road of the for-profit or follow that model, I am concerned that the rush for revenue is perhaps undermining our traditional university values or academic values. I worry about that at times. And so my question is, how do you balance that? Because there is this clearly need for revenue because of the shrinking population of students in the state, because of the decline in public funding for higher ed,
Right.
public education generally. And so there's a quest for sources of revenue.
Right.
And as a faculty member, you feel the pressure coming down upon you to conform. All right, and it's worrisome because at some point, you know, academic freedom, you know, the right to teach the way you see fit comes into play here. I mean, needs to be considered if we're going to preserve that. And I think that's an important value in American higher education. And I don't think it should be endangered in the rush for revenue. So how would you handle that?
So the question for me is quality. Can we still teach and maintain the brand of the institution and teach in a quality way? And I would argue that there are some programs that don't belong online, that it would be very difficult to teach those programs online in the right way, that pedagogically it's difficult to get them online. But there are other programs that I believe can be taught online, and that we need to make sure that we have training to teach them online, that we have the instructional designers to produce the right kind of program online, and that we should be teaching them online. The other trade-off, I think, is we can teach programs online that then can help us to support the other kinds of traditional programs that we have on campus that are really important to us. So right now, the market is in primarily master's programs that are online, those programs that we can produce for people who cannot come to our campus. Right now, our program that is most effective, that is our largest program, is an RN to BSN program.